a couple Catholic late in, not Enlightenment, right at the cusp here, right around 1500s, 1400s, things are getting very modernistic-y-ish. And late medieval times, you get this break between St. Thomas and the Aristotelians and a couple Catholic thinkers. One is Anselm, who's really, really hard, and ultimately I think wrong, but Anselm, and then, Francis Bacon. It's just a delicious name. It doesn't sound very Catholic because it sounds super Anglified. But this is really the way to conclude tonight. So Francis Bacon, I told you, the final cause, teleology, is one of the central principles of mankind. And basically, it's a doctrine that this guy, Bacon, attempted to flip on its head, and he did it successfully. And arguably, this Baconian turn, where he says, let's leave behind a teleological view of the world, of nature, a view of nature which is ordered. Let's leave it behind, and let's do science without a view of final cause, but with efficient causes alone. That is basically the dividing line. That's the end of the medieval times. Then the start of the Enlightenment, an Enlightenment kind of thought. It doesn't have that hard distinction of degree kind of boundary we always seek after. It was a slow distinction of degree. But so, really quickly, late medieval philosophy, you get to these two Catholic thinkers, and all of a sudden, Bacon makes an argument, let's do science, not in this sort of grand unifying way, where Aristotle preached, there's a final cause, so let's do, all science was kind of one. You studied philosophy, theology, physics, and mathematics. You couldn't go get a special degree at a university. You're just, people who are smart and privileged studied all this stuff. You know, the natural philosophy was called mathematics. You'd study some physics and then philosophy and theology, and you're smart. You know, like, that's what you would do if you're from privilege and pretty good. Bacon said, let's divide it up, and of course, this ultimately ended up working out for us into specific sciences, medical sciences, you know, biology. Medical science is a particular field within that. Physics, you have Newtonian physics and, you know, cosmology and all that. We have all that because Bacon said, let's split it up. But where he led the world awry is in getting rid of the final cause in the science. This is known as positivism. And it only studies efficient causes. What it's basically done is left us unable to ask the question why, from a scientific point of view. The sciences don't attempt to do this. And arguably they said, well, because it's not science. You know, we've made a specialty distinction for every different kind of science. We're not going to ask the big questions. Leave that to the philosophers and theologians. The problem is this. Ultimately, they can't ask questions like, well, why do cells divide? You know, why do some cells split at a high rate? You know, so you can't solve questions like cancer. Why did the Big Bang bang, or what came before it? Ultimately, questions of why are scientific. And this is one distinction that one stipulation that a lot of folks would say, okay, this was a wrong turn. Undoubtedly, at this point here, in the Catholic Church, you have this Baconian turn, and we got a lot of technology and advancement. Average human lifespan went up by like 25 years, where it had been like about 50 for thousands of years. I'm not arguing that wasn't good. Again, that's not the Catholic apologetic way. We'll take the technology and the longer lives. But we could have the divided sciences, which specialize in things, and also study a thing's final cause as well. But so, see, this, I just want you to understand that moving into the modern period, modernism really also begins with the Enlightenment. It's synonymous with it. Modernism. Beginning with that, you have a non-teleal, you have a mechanistic view of nature. So it's just you study it, and you don't think of it as being ordered to anything. And the universe is non-teleological, and you don't have a good view to the big, properly scientific question. And ultimately, if you remove causation, if you say, well, in the 1920s, when Einstein was a young man and he was a committed agnostic, he wanted with all of his being to find that the universe was without a cause. It was an infinite thing. But it just wasn't borne out by the cosmology of the 19-teens and 20s. And ultimately, he even admitted, hey, I was a committed agnostic. I wanted it to be this way, but ultimately, all of these things taken together, theory of relativity, the cosmology that was breaking in the late 20s, uncertainty principle, there has to be one beginning. And ultimately, if there's one beginning, you're just not getting around God. So people who are agnostics after the 1920s, they're just not being scientific, right? If there is a cause to the universe, I just don't see how you get around it as an educated person. I mean, they try to make us sound silly, but it's silly to hold otherwise.
No, but our fight is not with them. Our fight is within ourselves.
No, it's with everyone. That's what my onion's all about, right? It's with everyone. It's, hey, you got to be able to whatever, proselytize has a negative connotation, but you got to be able to spread the word and make defenses to everyone, starting at the outside of the onion in. First, there must be a God. Here's, by definition, he must be one. After he's one, okay, it's what we call the Jewish God, Yahweh, but here's why Christ is compelling. Then you get into biblical argument, right? And then and only then. But you have to be able to make the argument to the Bill Maher's of the world who want to snicker at you. That's just a fact of the 21st century. Yeah.
I was just saying, in response to a couple of the questions, that maybe Sir Francis Bacon was the first person to make a move towards secularism and taking God out of all of the natural sciences.
Yeah, and at the popular level, I mean, he's a Catholic, so he believes in God, but ultimately it was the real only first move for what we call secularism, right? If you take God out, look at it this way. The comment is that Francis Bacon, positivism, taking final causation out of the sciences, basically posits what must be a secular universe, even though he's a monk. That's true, right? I mean, it doesn't, because if you take God out of the sciences, that's unscientific. Then we're going to talk more about what's going on at the popular and democratic level next week in modernism, when all the democracies sprang up. And you're not supposed to talk about God at the dinner table, and God's supposed to be separated from the state, then you're just leaving a really non-representative area for God. And this is what I think is the area in which the argument needs to be had. So for next week, think about...
Nope, not next week.
Oh, sorry, 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Next lecture, which is 2 weeks from now. Think about what the effect of removing God from all these spheres has been based on this. Yes?
So you see the efficient cause and final cause in our apostolic creed.
How is that?
As we speak about God created.
Oh, right. Yes.
God is the Father Almighty.
Right.
And then the logos about Jesus Christ.
Right.
And then he died, rose again.
Right.
And went to heaven, like the efficient and final cause.
Right, this is perfect. And this is the way I would seek to actually end the lecture, is to pick one cause over another. All of these causes are at work. And I didn't, take it on myself to go into matter and form. But right, there are efficient causes, right? I mean, if the gravity is an efficient cause on things falling to the ground, it's not a final cause for it. Final causation deals with a bunch of efficient causes working together. The problem with positivism in science is if you pose there's only efficient causation out there at work, then you're not getting an entire conception of things. And you're posing a universe that is not accurately described as ours. Our universe has all these causations at work, and if you'll suspend all of them except one and say, we're only gonna study the